I didn't know that punk rock, which is a music which strives to be rebellious, and rebellion equals to cool, at least in that world. I was
Right.
never in my life able to relate to that thing before that, because up until then, I was like, if you
Right.
disobey, that's a bad thing. You should not do that.
Right.
Suddenly, now this
Right.
world randomly opens and tells me that it's cool to disobey. Not only is it not a bad thing, but
Right.
you might be rewarded if you disobey, really, really nicely. So that's just one example, but even in terms of, I'm a big fan of writing. It's something that's very close to me. I try to do it as much as possible. I try to get as good at it as much as I can. And
Right.
listening to those lyrics, the way the words were crafted, and just whatever story was being told. A lot of my storytelling pursuits were actually born at the time, even though I didn't even realize it. So I think one of the things that COVID did, that COVID brought to life, was a lot of people. I remember seeing this viral tweet that Harvard students are actually paying $40,000 for a Netflix subscription, because
Right.
if you're
Yeah.
paying that amount of money and you aren't even there, you're just looking at video lectures. That is
Yeah.
what made a lot of people really put things
How is it
into
different from Udemy or Coursera or right?
exactly.
And you know what I'm talking about. So,
Exactly.
how is it even different? And all your, I mean, and all your sharing is knowledge, and of course, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of like, I mean, the way I see it, there's a lot of entitlement going on in terms of like charging a premium just because it's a quote unquote Ivy League or whatever. I love the campuses. It's great. I've been to Harvard. It's great. I took a picture next to whatever the founder. It's amazing, right? What was that your experience, or was it very different for you?
There was that. Where I was lucky was I was able to pay a major chunk of my tuition from the co-op that I was doing while I was a student. So I really
Got it.
did get lucky there, but I also am aware that there aren't a lot of colleges that allow that. Purdue is one of the very rare exceptions that lets you do
Right.
a long-term co-op while you're still a student. So that helped me a little bit, but so I didn't really have that heavy of an amount. Also, keeping in mind that tuition fees are actually some of the lowest in the country. So it's
Got it.
funny, I didn't even actually know that before I even saw the admit letter. It was only
Got
after
it.
I saw that and I went and shared to my parents that, hey, I got admit. And my dad was like, okay, well, how much is it going to cost you? And I was like, that's a good question. I don't know. So that's when I went
Right.
back and checked, and I was like, oh, hey, that's not that bad at all, especially comparing to USC and Duke, which were at least like 2x more what my
Mm-hmm.
tuition was at Purdue.
Hey everyone, welcome to our next episode. Here we have Naman Pandey. Naman, welcome to the show.
So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. I'm so excited to talk to you today, Naman. Let me introduce you properly, and then so that everyone hearing get to know who you are a little bit, and then of course we'll dive into so many other questions. So, welcome first of all. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming a multifaceted professional, Naman Pandey, who embodies the art of storytelling, the passion of engineering management, the innovation of technology consulting, and the resilience of entrepreneurship. Our guest has transformed data into compelling narratives, guided projects for leading companies, and collaborated on cutting edge blockchain solutions. With a deep understanding of programming languages like Python, SQL, JavaScript, Java, and R, he's solved complex problems and presented solutions with tools like Tableau and Power BI. Not only he has led teams and projects across diverse industries, but he's also ventured into the world of entrepreneurship, facing failures and triumphs alike with a vision for long-term impact. Join us as we explore the fascinating journey of Naman Pandey, who continues to seek opportunities to make a difference one story at a time. And most importantly, Naman is the founder and host of Ready, Set, Do podcast that's reaching thousands and millions of people across the globe. Welcome to our show, Naman. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
That is quite the introduction, I have to say. I'm definitely blown away by how well you put that across and how articulate that was. So really appreciate you doing that. Yeah, and just in terms of a quick career snapshot, I graduated from a computer science degree back from India in 2018. worked for close to a couple of years at PwC, where I got my technology consulting experience. Um, that's where the blockchain projects and a lot of the programming languages, I don't want to say expertise, but at least I was exposed to a lot of these technologies back in the time. And then at some
Right.
point during my time at PwC, I realized that I wanted to no longer, be an engineer, but kind of wanted to manage other engineers. So that kind of led me to do my master's in engineering management from Purdue, which is exactly what that sounds like. They teach you how to manage engineers. So I graduated in 2022, and ever since have been working as a senior analyst slash project manager at Cushman and Wakefield, which is a commercial real estate firm based out of Chicago. I basically help people automate their jobs. So we can talk more about that down the line, but it's something that I think is really cool. And, I just feel really blessed to be doing what I do for my day job. But obviously, as you referenced earlier, 6 months ago or whereabouts, I started my podcast, Ready, Set, Do, where I talk to not experts that are just two steps ahead of somebody that hasn't started. So the goal with that is to share these stories in a way that's, really relatable to people, because at least me personally, when you have an expert that's like, do A, then B, then C, that's just not as helpful for me. I'm one of those people that likes to see somebody in front of me trip and fall. So then that's how I know to not trip and fall. So that's
Right.
basically the gist behind that. And yeah, it's been a pleasure growing that. As you said, a lot of it is just entrepreneurship, but it also
Right.
lets me interact with other professionals such as you. So all in all, it's been such an amazing time for me.
Yeah, no, no, I cannot agree more. How do you think it is doing? How do you think is the role of podcasts playing today in modern society?
That's a great question. um I think a part of me worries, or at least when I was starting out, I was deeply concerned about the fact that the space is absolutely saturated, and that I'm sure you've heard this as well, that, oh, there's so many podcasts, do we really need one more? But I
Right.
think where it becomes really important, Vijay, is, at least as far as unscripted long form conversations go, for me, the magic sauce in that is that you cannot pretend for 2 hours, to be somebody that you're not. You could, again, if you're a professional actor, you probably would be able to pull that off. But most people, when they are in a setting like this, when they're talking to somebody on camera, it's incredibly hard for them to be something that they're not. More often than not, people will let their guard down and either say things or behave in ways that they, you know, like dial back to. That's just who they are as people. So to me,
Yeah.
that's the biggest, or that's what draws me the most to podcasting, because it's just really raw. Unlike, even YouTubers that are really famous and that have millions of subscribers and such, but at the end of the day, you're taking a take and then you're editing it again and again. You're just, you're removing all the blank spaces. Anywhere you stuttered is gone. This that just does not happen with a podcast. Your stuttering is
Right.
there, it's stuck to your face, and that's
Yeah.
it, you have to go
Th-
forward with it.
that's probably how people talk, and like that's how the natural way of talking, and like you're making a mistake, a grammatical one or a stuttering one. I think it's very normal for people to go about it and taking 100 takes and having the perfect shot for the 30-second clip on on a prime time mainstream situation. That's very different, right? I mean, speaking of mainstream, like how do you see the mainstream media affecting everyday thinking?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Definitely have thoughts on that. I do feel this almost exodus in terms of people's beliefs and faith. Maybe faith is the better word than belief, from mainstream media, in that, um, as we probably know, or as most people that like to, dig one level deeper know, that at the end of the day,
Right.
it's at some point down the line, I'm not sure when this happened, but
Right.
it's no longer the job of the media to say the truth. Now it's their job
Right.
to raise fund for their stakeholders. Those
Right.
two are very different things. Those two are very
Yeah.
different endeavors.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the direction that I've personally noticed. At least
Got
in
it.
the last 5 to 10 years. I don't know what lies ahead, but that's
Yeah.
where you find all of these individual journalistic profiles or personal brands come up and be really strong in that. You can trust them, you can rely on them, because that's what their brand is built on. They're like, I'm on the floor right
Yeah.
now recording this with my camera. I'm in Ukraine or wherever, and this is what's happening. You can't doubt that
Yeah.
they're there. So yeah, I don't know if
Absolutely.
that answers your question, but
No, no, no,
those
that's
are my
good. I mean,
thoughts.
like, yeah, but definitely, I think it did answer to a large part. Like, I was also trying to understand, like, how relevant are they still in the modern society as it is evolving in 2024, right? Yeah, I mean, people give different versions. Like, my personal take is like, I don't think they are relevant at all. They seem to be living in a different world altogether.
Uh-huh.
And when we go talk to an everyday person, they seem to be having a totally different opinion. And just entirely contradicting to what the mainstream narrative is. So yeah, I was just trying to understand, are they still relevant or maybe not? Maybe they have to reinvent something. CNN, for instance, launched their CNN Plus.
Okay.
And I think they spent 200 or $300 million to launch that, and it was shut down within a month or so
Hmm.
because no one was watching it, right?
Right, I do remember reading about that. Yeah, I think they got execs from top places such as Apple Plus, etc., to help build that, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, yeah, that's so crazy. Not money, not well spent.
Yeah,
That's all I can say about it.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to just warm you up and basically understand you a little bit more. Of course,
Uh-huh.
we connected the other day, and I would like to understand your background as well. Of course, we are from India, but I've never been in Kolkata or in West Bengal and that side of the country before. I love to travel, and I want to go probably in the next few visits and try to make. I've told myself that I have to go visit
Yeah.
the Northeast and many states in the area, right? So
Hmm.
we have made some good friends. I don't know if you know about one person called Gangadhar Krishnan. All he does is travel Northeast with his family,
Okay.
and
That sounds fun.
he it sounds fun. He's on LinkedIn a lot. I mean, he posts pictures with his. He really travels on Tata Nano. I mean,
Huh.
shout out to him, and because and he operates tours and things like that, and people travel from cities like Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai, and then he helps people explore the northeast version of it. So shout out to Gangadhar. I never planned to give a shout out for him, but at the same time, when we entered this conversation, I couldn't stop thinking of him. But he's a great guy. He lives in Hyderabad, I think, but he's doing a great job with that. So tell me a little bit more about how was growing up studying in India and growing up in Kolkata. Did you grow up in Kolkata? Is that right?
I did. I did. Yeah.
Okay. How was that journey growing up and until you pursued engineering?
Yeah. It's been a while since I've reminisced around my childhood, so it's funny that you put me on that spot here. But let's
Now,
see. I think the
it's all about your
three.
journey, man. I'd love to know your journey, and
No,
we'll
yeah,
talk
I
everything.
think
So
it's great. Yeah, no, it's
yeah,
just genuinely been a while. So I like to introspect a lot. I'm just that type of a person. It's like one of my favorite things to do is to just sit and think about the past, about the future. Just think. I
right.
just enjoy thinking a lot. But it's been a while since I thought about my childhood. So happy to do that
Mm,
live here for you. Um, I think the three biggest themes that jump out looking back would be um competition, just in
right.
terms of academics, because I went to a fairly big school. There were about 300 kids in each grade, 50 or so students in my class, in each class,
Right.
I think, which is pretty
Right.
standard, at least for India around those times. I don't know what the cohort sizes are these days, but there was this constant pressure on me by my parents and peers and just my guardians to always get good grades. It was really important that I ranked first every time, every grade. Anything else was less than optimal is what I'm happy saying, at least for the record. So that in its own way kind of built me from the ground up to always really just look at the world in a way that's, it's a race that I have to win. Like my only purpose for anything that I do really is to win the whole time. And if I don't, then it's a failure. Which I have worked to kind of get out of that mindset. That's not what I believe in anymore. But it did take a decent amount of work to break out of that mindset. So that was the first theme. I guess the second would be camaraderie. Um, I grew up playing cricket on the street beside my house with other kids in the locality that were thankfully my age. So I was every day at 5 p.m., no matter what, day or season rather it was, we would all just be
Right,
there. Sometimes we wouldn't even have a sport to play because if somebody hit the ball too hard, it went somewhere, couldn't be retrieved. But so now you're
right,
just running around playing hide and seek or whatever. And this is not
right.
even when I was like a kid. This is like, middle school or even the eighth, ninth grade, etc. This was a ritual. And I know that
Was
for a
was
fact.
cricket the popular sport
Yeah,
in your area as well?
definitely.
Okay,
Yeah. We played a decent amount of soccer as well, but cricket was definitely
got it,
the go-to for sure.
got it,
Also, it is
got
way
it.
easier to play cricket on a road. It was a pitched road after all. We didn't have a
Yeah,
ground. That was a luxury we couldn't afford. So
yeah,
it's much more relenting to play cricket versus soccer on a pitch like that, because the moment you fall, you're done for. Like
yeah,
scraped knees is just even, you know, scraping the
yeah.
surface. No pun intended. Um,
Right, right,
and I know that's not something that happens anymore. I have nephews that are that age that are currently growing up in Calcutta. They have no
right,
semblance of this camaraderie that I experienced. It comes in different
right,
forms. One of them is he's a budding cricketer, so he goes to cricket
right,
coaching. He gets his dose
right,
of social life and camaraderie from there. But there's something
right,
about that being not scripted, like you're just there because you have nowhere else to be, and you're
right.
stuck with those five people that has have to see your sad face every day. So that was a big part. It shaped me in a lot of ways. I interacted with a broad cohort of kids from various social backgrounds that honestly I
Right.
would not have gotten to if it wasn't for the fact that they were my neighbors. um
Got it.
so that would be the second big theme. And the third really would just be, I think I want to say protection. So I grew up in a big joint family. I was the youngest kid. I had some cousins, but I was the smallest of my generation at least. So
Right.
the I always, in a weird, not intentional way, just felt coddled in a good way. I don't mean coddled in the negative sense of the word where it's just overbearing, but I
Right.
knew that all of my needs were accounted for. If I ran into any problem, there were at least five people that I could choose from in order to who should I go to talk about this. My brother, who is
Right.
8 years older than me, obviously had a huge part in my, not only in the past tense, but he still does, in my, just the way I am and the person that I am. I was in
Right.
Alaska with him this past week, so that was such a
Wonderful.
such a great time. Yeah. So I think, yeah, not to ramble on anymore, but those three themes would be the ways that I would describe at least my early days, as
Got it.
Wikipedia would probably file me under.
No, thanks for sharing that. So, are you have siblings? While you're growing up, are you the only child, or?
Yeah, I have one older brother, but that's
Got it.
just my own brother. But I did grow up with other siblings that were my cousins. So
Got
there's
it.
three of them.
Got it.
So we
Understood.
were a group of five people, give or take.
Got it. Got it. Understood. So, I mean, growing up in India, I mean, there is this one common theme. I at least like that comes again and again in terms of like, yeah, study hard and like go get the job, a dream job, and then buy a home, get married, and have kids. I mean, that's like the a standard template seemed to have existed for a long time. How has that approach shaped your thinking while you were growing up? And I'm sure probably in the late 90s, that's when you probably grew up. And how has that shaped up the thinking? Because exposure to uh, internet was not that prominent, at least prior to 2005 or so. I mean, after 2000, the early 2000s and the era of internet and exposure to it has grew a lot and lot and lot. And now we have like millions of users across like different platforms and whatnot. So how has, I mean, the reason I brought internet is because this also brings in alternate ways of thinking. This is how the
Mhm.
world evolves. A lot of, I mean, like a large part of India is like there is a lot of like socialistic thinking, and in the US, of course, it's an entirely like a capitalist country and things like that. And we'll talk about it. And so overall, in terms of like, okay, there is a template that is normally set out in the circle of relatives and parents and whatnot. Like, and of course, there's a lot of like registration. Oh, how much did you score in your 12th standard? How much did you score? I mean, there's a random question that like any neighbor would ask that question, or like,
Yeah,
and how did you go? Which college did you get? The what stream are you into? I mean, like people are so curious about knowing everything
yeah,
about like everyone,
it's true.
and maybe it's a good or bad thing. I don't know. But like, what must that be for kids that are growing up, right? In terms of, does it set a high expectation or does it put a lot of pressure?
Yeah, very interesting question. A lot of themes were explored in the question itself. One small correction is I actually did grow up in the early 2000s. I was born in 96, so I actually have no recollection of the 90s.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah,
got it. So
most of my
you
memory.
from day one you pretty much you had internet. Got it.
Well, no, not really. I think,
Not really. Okay.
yeah, definitely not true because at least, so I come from a fairly, you can say like smack dab middle class family, at least at the time while growing up. So,
Right. Right.
so it was, I think, around 2004 or 2005 where my house personally got its the first like dial-up internet connection, which
Right.
was, I
Right.
think,
That
the
was fun.
bandwidth was limited to like 512
Yeah.
kbps or something ridiculous like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. 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 I remember those noises. I mean, the dial. Yeah. Yeah, anyway, sorry. Go
Exactly.
ahead.
Yeah. So, the reason why I really like that you brought up the internet is because I think outside of my family and outside of the basic stuff like my social structure and all that, it had a huge impact on me personally because what happened was, my brother went away to college around the time I reached middle school. So right as soon as I was
Right.
entering adolescence, and then I was left unsupervised with an internet connection, and the world was my oyster. Suddenly, I could explore topics. I could go on Wikipedia to learn about random satanic cults. I don't know why I was into that at the time, but it was something that interested me deeply. Um,
Right.
and more importantly, the biggest effect that it brought on me was it exposed me to music. So
Hmm.
it's kind of hard to express for me right now, but this is a known fact. I'll come back to this, but this is a known fact that
Sure.
the music that we like in our teens is pretty much what we're bonded to for the rest of our lives. And the reason for that, I learned this on another podcast. I think it was Andrew Huberman that was explaining this. But the reason that happens is because of the hormonal, because of all the new hormones in our body, we attach such a deep emotional bond with the music that we like at the time that once we grow
Right.
older it just becomes really difficult to have that same amount of emotional attachment to a certain music, which is why if you pick a random person and if you ask them what type of music they like, and then if you ask them what type of music they liked when they were a teen, probably there would be a huge amount of overlap between those two. That's just how
Right.
it
Right.
works. So, and the reason I bring that up is because I used to be a big, or I still am a big Green Day fan, and it was just opening this door to a world for me that was just so full of rebellion, and there were so many themes that I was exposed to that I had no idea. Like I didn't know that punk rock, which is a music which strives to be rebellious, and rebellion equals to cool, at least in that world. I was
Right.
never in my life able to relate to that thing before that, because up until then I was like, if you
Right.
disobey, that's a bad thing, you should not do that.
Right.
Suddenly now this
Right.
world randomly opens and tells me that it's cool to disobey. Not only is it not a bad thing, but
Right.
you might be rewarded if you disobey really really nicely. So that's just one example, but even in terms of, I'm a big fan of writing. It's something that's very close to me. I try to do it as much as possible. I try to get as good at it as much as I can. And
Right.
listening to those lyrics, the way the words were crafted, and just whatever story was being told, a lot of my storytelling pursuits were actually born at the time, even though I didn't really even realize it. So I don't know. Again, there's a lot of other things to cover here as well, but specifically around the internet, I would say that was the effect. Oh yeah, and to finally to your third question part, I think was the pressure aspect of it, right? So I
Right.
think I was lucky to be in a family where there was pressure, and my brother has just always been a 10 on 10 performer his entire life, so that didn't help me at all. But Where it did help a little bit was for my parents. I think they realized that their elder son is doing great. So maybe they cut me a little bit of slack. I think again, I don't know if that was the reason, but they were like, it's fine. You can do your best. We'll support you. And I know for a fact he did not have that. So shout out to him for dealing with way more pressure than I had to. But by the time I grew up to be around college age and competitive exam age, things
Right.
were a little bit more, cut and dry for me in terms of like just do your best. We trust you. We know you're a good, smart kid. If you really apply yourself, you can crush these exams. I didn't end up crushing them, but I did okay enough to, not be really bad. But yeah, I mean that's kind of about the pressure aspect. I just consider myself really lucky that I wasn't exposed to all that much pressure.
Okay, that's good to hear. And how was your journey with? Thanks for sharing that. Very interesting. Growing up and siblings and the neighborhood, and yeah, thanks for sharing that background. How was the journey getting into engineering? And one important question about engineering is, like, there are too many engineering colleges in South
Uh-huh.
Asia, in India especially, and in the south where I come from, at least, there's thousands of colleges. And something, I want to be really clear about this, because there any person I talk to is probably a bachelor of engineering,
Hmm.
and when I look at the country in the kind of like engineering work that's happening, uh, uh, honestly. Honestly, it's underwhelming, right? So
Right.
because of the kind of engineering opportunities that is there, and I've coached some of the engineering students for whatever reason, and they needed help, and I helped coach them. There are 54 papers in engineering and things like that, and it's all theory about so many books, so many very very interesting books. But at the same time, when it applied to practicality, I see some problems there, right? Maybe we'll
Hmm.
get into it later, but like, tell me about your journey getting into engineering, and how was that journey?
Yeah. So as with most other stories, it seems at least the pivotal journeys of my life, it was also not planned. It just kind of happened. So the original plan was for I was really interested in becoming a doctor. So
Wow. Okay. Good.
yeah, and as most kids, I took up at least. So I went to an ISC school, ICSE school. So you have to
Right.
choose between computers and biology for your high school, so 11th and 12th grade. So I picked biology
Right.
because I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. What's will crush this. Turns out a
Right.
lot of the biology in at least junior high and high school in India, if you at least go on that track, is very extremely just I'll just say it's plant stuff. So that was
Hmm.
I really should have done more research around this. I mean, I do realize that this is my own, doing, that this was news to me, but I
Right.
just within the first couple months immediately knew that there was no way I could do this. It was just horrible. I just couldn't care less about what the 32nd molecule of ATP is when plants are trying to do photosynthesis.
Right.
I
Right.
just saw no rhyme or reason why I was being even taught that or forced to learn that stuff. There was obviously
Right.
some animal stuff. I remember there was a really cool big chapter on diseases. I love that,
Right.
but it
Right.
was what, like 5% of the curriculum. That's not going to get you too far. So
Hmm.
with that in mind, I'm sure you also might be aware that unlike the US and maybe Canada, you can't just willy-nilly swap your courses. Like once you pick something, you're locked in. Like you can't go back. Like you can't
Right.
swap your major midway or something. So that was
Right.
very rough in that I pretty much like the next time I opened my biology book after the first 2 months of grade 11 was for my board
Yeah.
exams. So
Yeah.
thankfully we had a 14-day gap before that exam. I pretty much
Right.
did this exercise of pretty much absolute rote memorization. Like I just mugged everything up left, right, and center.
Yeah.
I had no idea what was going on. I just turned a page. I was like, okay, I'm going to mug this up. And I mugged it up. And I did okay enough to get 86 out of 100. It felt very undeserved to this day.
Hmm.
It just feels wrong. But coming to the actual, meat and bones of, my response, was that I think it was my father that eventually knocked some sense into me. He was like, you might not think of engineering as the solution to your problems, but what it is that it gives you the ability to apply yourself later if you want to do something else with your life. At the
Right.
time, I didn't really fully understand what he meant by that, but having, knowing what I know now, I think he was 100% right. Um, it just so happened for me as a bonus that my career track after that was at least pertinent to engineering still. But I do agree 100% that, to your point, the reason why there's so many engineers in India is largely because people just like to hedge their chances. It's like,
Yeah.
here's this pretty safe little option. You can do this for the
Right.
time being, get your degree, and then if you decide to not use it, that's fine. That's a later
Yeah.
conversation. But at least you'll
Right.
then be in a position to be employable. And I think that's
Right.
one thing that the engineering degree does in a way that no other degree does, at least to my to my knowledge. You
Right.
could you could argue
Yeah.
economics and such, but I don't know. I feel like, at least for a country like India, your best chances of building wealth and getting any sort of financial independence is by
Right.
leveraging either technology or media. So those are my thoughts. For me, again, once I was in engineering school, it was just, how it goes. It's just, a continual
Yeah.
rat race. You have like a tunnel vision,
Yeah.
exactly like that. That this is
Yeah.
the world that exists. There's nothing outside of it. I did some cool stuff.
Got it.
My college had a couple hackathons that I participated in. My peers were
Right.
really nice. I'm still to this day friends with a lot of them and really thankful for them, because I do think that it's your peers that, shape your
Yeah.
college life in a way that really nothing else can. So happy to shine a light
Yeah.
on any aspect further in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah. No, no, that is great, actually. I mean, like, as an idea, I mean, approaching engineering, I like that because there are marvelous things that you can do with engineering, and education is an enabler. It empowers millions of people and like crores of people in Indian context, of course, and it has
Mhm.
lifted a lot of people from poverty, no doubt about it. 100%
Yeah.
on that same exact same page. What is something that I don't really like? I'm trying to appreciate it, but I really couldn't, is because the practicality of it.
Uh-huh.
Because someone spent 4 years or 5 years into civil engineering or architecture, or completely like an electrical engineering or mechanical engineering, but at the same time they have to, after they finish their engineering, they have to go learn Java or C++ to get a software job, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
is, I mean, come on, you spend like 4 years doing civil engineering, and now you're trying to learn Java. I have my own friends calling me, hey, what is the best way? What is the best book to learn Java or like C++? I have referred books as well, so I know that story for that. I mean, it bugs me from that point of view. But no questions to you on that front. But I'm just saying it's my personal feeling.
I
Come on,
agree
guys.
with
I mean,
that.
like there's
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
largely in agreement. It shouldn't be like that. And I think from what I hear and what I read, a lot of that is changing, in that there's a lot of
good.
manufacturing that's now happening in India. So a lot of
That,
these
that's that's
engineers are
good.
finally getting to, actually wield what they learned. So that's good. But again,
Right.
I cannot speak to the specifics of that.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, if they can approach a profession what they love, that's all it's about it. I mean, someone I know who's a relative, so he wanted to do medicine. Since you were interested about medicine, and all he wants to do is like medicine, right? So,
Mhm.
and he couldn't get the medicine seat for whatever reason. He missed it by zero point 0.5 or zero point 0.4, but he got the top engineering college. So he went to the engineering
Huh.
college, spent a day in the engineering college, and on the very same day, he understood, no, it's not working out. It's not going to happen. And then so he had to quit the same day and then come out and then write the medical entrance or whatever clearance exam the next year. And he went to become a doctor. So
Wow.
it's like, yeah, he spent at least 2 years making sure he's only becoming a doctor. So yeah, like both ends up like, yeah, who are like passionate. Oh, this is what I want to do. So it's great. So USA, I mean, like of course, US is a magnet and it draws a lot of people to the country. I was in the US myself about 5 years, so I know how it feels like. So what was your motivation like in pursuing a master's in US, and like how did that start, and what was the motivation behind that?
Yeah, I'm finally able to answer this question. not adjacent to the truth, but the very truth, because the only other time I've answered this question has been for interviews or, jobs that I've applied to. So really happy to be finally on the record, sharing the truth and nothing but the absolute truth. So
Yeah.
I went to Bangalore for my engineering. And what happened was
Okay.
I got placement at PwC, which is obviously a very, world renowned firm. I was very happy with
Yeah.
that. Except about 4 weeks out, 4 weeks out from my graduation date, I learned that they had decided to, for whatever reason, ship me back to Calcutta, or maybe I should say Kolkata, which is my
Right.
hometown.
But,
So,
but how do they say? I mean, there's just like interpret. How do you actually say? Do you say Calcutta or Kolkata? Like, how is it exactly said?
so the right way to say it in Bengali is Kolkata.
Kolkata. Okay, good.
Correct.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I just, because I grew up saying Calcutta, I just kind of default to that. I think there's beauty in letting things be and naming, calling them what they are. Like
Right.
Bangalore for me is always Bangalore and not Bengaluru.
I call it Bangalore all the time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it just really depends. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. But
Yeah.
yeah, coming back, what happened was they were like, nope, you have to go back. And I was like, no, can I please just stay in Bangalore? They were like, either go back or we resend your letter. And I was like, okay, fine. So maybe you will know this, but for any other listener, the way, at least in my societal structure, there's more than one in India. But the way it works is, if you're living in a city where your family lives, it's very hard for you to make the case to not live at your parents' house. So what I'm
Yeah.
getting at is,
Yeah.
even though my daily commute total time back and forth was about more than 3 hours, just because of traffic and other considerations, that it's just how it goes, it was really never an option for me to rent an apartment maybe closer to my work that I could just stay at to
Yeah.
minimize my or optimize my time and such. So while I'm incredibly grateful for that, because again, I never had to worry about rent, I had home cooked food every day waiting for me after a long day at work. Lots to be really grateful for. But on the flip side, what it did was it made me feel, I don't want to say trapped, but because it's just kind of a harsh word, but I did feel like my independence was somehow severely restricted. So
This is what, like, you're talking about days in Bangalore.
no, this I'm talking about when I was shipped back to Kolkata and I was working
Well,
there.
back to Kolkata. Okay, got it.
Correct. So within the first 6 months or so, I realized that this is great. Like, I was doing good work. I was happy with my manager, my peers at work. I was happy living at home. But I knew somewhere deep inside me, maybe not even that deep, but I knew that this was not it for me. I couldn't see myself doing that even for the next 2 or 3 years for that matter. I was like, immediately I was already thinking about, what can I do to prison break? What can I do to escape? So Escape had two big labels, at least in my mind at the time. Well, let's say we had three, but the third one was Gate, and I knew for a fact I didn't want to, get a master's degree having just finished my bachelor's degree from India. I knew that that was not me. So that removes that. That leaves two options, either CAT or the GRE. So again, like, I'm fairly analytical. I don't hate working hard, but if you just look at the sheer competition that goes behind the cat, also keeping in mind that I was GEM, so general engineer male, that's like, you're done for if you fall into that category. I'm sure there's thousands of YouTube videos around just GEM rants about how that's
Right.
just, you're just screwed. Like, if you're not the top, literally 99.5th percentile, just go home, don't even try. So
Right.
that was one option that I was at least speculating, and the other was the GRE, which I've always really liked. Going back to my love for writing, I've always enjoyed English, reading, writing, all of it, speaking. Math is really, pretty much a joke in the GRE. I don't want to say that in a way that's, ungrateful, but it's really not that difficult, at least the math section. So
Right.
because of my personal skill set, I then started thinking, what is a competition that I can take part in where I am most favorable to win or have a favorable outcome? And to me, that answer was very straightforward. It was 100% the GRE. So I took it. And funnily enough, in my entire peer group that I've met in the US, I'm actually the only person that had a greater verbal section score than the quant section score. I still get, a lot of, flack for that. People are like, what sort of an engineer are you? That's just
Right.
blasphemy. How could you let that happen? But that just goes to my point about why I knew that I would succeed in that, because I knew the game that I was playing, and I knew I was equipped to win in it. So once I did that, the rest of it was fairly straightforward. I was applying for spring of 2020, mostly as a reason to just understand, test the waters, figure out how it goes, and then the actual plan was to apply actually, like, properly for fall of 2020. So I only
Right.
just applied to three places: Duke, Purdue, and USC. Only one place would have me, that was Purdue. It was good
Right.
enough because, it didn't matter. So from
Right.
not even wanting to go or not having any plans to go to,
Right.
start a master's, suddenly I was 1 month away from an admit and starting a new life in America. So
Hmm.
very, very grateful. There were a lot of, touch and go points there where, like, I submitted something on the last day. A certain professor sent me the LOR like 1 hour before the deadline. Like, again, I couldn't even, there's so much that could have gone wrong, but still to this day feel so lucky about how things worked out, even though I got 2 months in the US before everything went downhill and COVID happened. But still, I wouldn't change a single thing about, my journey in terms of how I got here.
Right. Right. No, no, very interesting. So how was studying? Of course, it is like the other side of the world. Obviously, not just by time, but so many other factors. U.S. is U.S. and the epicenter of a variety of things. But how was the studying in institution in U.S. and comparing that to an engineering? I'm not going to compare apples to oranges, but at the same time, how was the experience like pursuing that, like 2 or 3 years of like it's you did your MS correct
Correct. Yes.
in Purdue.
Yeah.
So how was that, like 2 years of experience, like coming truly from a different country? How was that experience?
Yeah, so the short of it is that I just absolutely loved it. Every single day, I
Right.
felt grateful to be where I was. There was a decent amount of
Right.
imposter syndrome in that I was like, how am I in this classroom with this cohort of people that are so obviously demonstratively smarter than me? Like, how did I get here? But I found ways to deal with that. I'll just say that, not to get into too much detail there. But my course at Purdue was actually, it included an option for a co-op for an entire year. So I did end up doing that. So my
Right.
actual duration at Purdue was 2.5 years, even though
Got
for
it.
a whole year I was actually not at Purdue. I was working full time in Louisville, Kentucky. So
Got it.
that was also, a very, very interesting experience, in that suddenly you're not in a student town, but you're in an actual big boy town by yourself, and you don't know a
Right.
single person
Right.
there, and you're
Yeah.
working, and you're suddenly, you're living a big boy job and such.
Yeah.
But to go back to my time at Purdue, definitely enjoyed. So the way the engineering management curriculum works
Did
is
we go
half
to
your
the Derby
credits.
there in Louisville? So,
Sorry.
just a sidetrack question. We go to the Kentucky Derby at all in being in
I did.
Louisville?
I did, as well as the KFC Center, which is the original Kentucky Fried Chicken place
Yeah, yeah,
in the yeah. Both of those
yeah.
were really amazing experiences. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. So sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, yeah, you're good. You're good. So, yeah, so the way the curriculum works is that half your credits come from the engineering school, the other half come from your management school. So I thought I would enjoy the management more, but I really just like all of it. I just was happy to be there. I don't care what I'm learning. Just I would just go and sit in classes and just learn and just, look around, think, do my assignments. All of it was amazing. In terms of, I guess, peer circle, as I referenced before, I knew by the time it was really important. So for my
Right.
first year and a half ish at Purdue, I basically had no friends. It was really rough. But for the last year, I was exposed to, a group of seven, eight close friends that I'm still very close with. We take trips every couple months or so. Probably
Right.
my closest friends in the world. So I was exposed to them as well, and then that just absolutely, you know took my experience to a new level altogether, because if I was having fun before, I was cruising now. Like, now I had all of the knowledge imbibing during the day, and all of the camaraderie and, fun and social times by evening or night. and then all of us got
Right.
placed, and then you know how that goes. It's just a constant party pretty much for the last couple months. So
Of course, you can't do
really
it
fond
without it. I mean,
memories. Yeah, yeah, yep.
right, right. So, okay, amazing. So, I mean, like, I speak to so many people, even at work, but while I was at US, even otherwise, off very recently as well. I mean, uh, students spend. I mean, I'm sure the exposure is terrific. I'm sure, and they come out of the college and with a huge debt also. Was that your experience, or was it very different for you?
There was that. Where I was lucky was I was able to pay a major chunk of my tuition from the co-op that I was doing while I was a student. So I really
Got it.
did get lucky there, but I also am aware that there aren't a lot of colleges that allow that. Purdue is one of the very rare exceptions that lets you do
Right.
a long-term co-op while you're still a student. So that helped me a little bit, but so I didn't really
Mm.
have that heavy of an amount. Also, keeping in mind that Purdue fees, our tuition fees are actually some of the lowest in the country. So it's
Got it.
funny, I didn't even actually know that before I even saw the admit letter. It was only
Got
after
it.
I saw that and I went and shared to my parents that, hey, I got an admit. And my dad was like, okay, well, how much is it going to cost you? And I was like, that's a good question. I don't know. So that's when I went
Right.
back and checked, and I was like, oh, hey, that's not that bad at all, especially comparing to USC and Duke, which were at least like 2x more what my
Hmm.
tuition was at Purdue. So again, I
Got it.
cannot stress enough on how lucky I got with all of that.
Right.
But so yeah, as it turns out, in terms of debt, I was able to pay off my last penny within within 12 months of working full time, and have been
Hmm.
saving money since. So again, really
That
lucky
is
in that
no,
aspect as well.
that is an amazing story to tell, and I'm glad you did that, and then I'm sure more people should know about it. I mean, if anyone has to pursue an MS or a degree in Purdue, like, do you know how much would it cost, like for a bachelor's or a master's? Because like there'll be so many others who will listen in the
Yeah.
future to this conversation, and how much would it cost them? You said it's probably the lowest in the country.
Mhm.
Just to give them a ballpark would be very useful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So this may have changed. So the numbers I'm quoting are from
That's
the
fine,
2020-21 era. But also, Purdue
right?
is notorious for not or for freezing tuition since like I think 20 years or something. I see a lot of
Mm.
marketing material around that, so I trust them. But for me, for my entire master's degree across 2 years, the tuition fee was about $30,000 USD, and for the bachelor's, I think it would across 4 years, I think it would come out to be somewhere close to around 60 to $70,000, I would say. Which
Got it.
again, I know
Got
it
it.
sounds like a lot, but it's actually on the cheaper side if you look at
It's that's yeah,
the other.
actually, yeah, because I know people who have spent like 200,000, and
Exactly.
some I know who are pursuing like medicine. They are actually gearing up for 400 or 500,000 over several years, right? I mean, so
It's just
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah. In comparison, this is definitely. I mean, yeah. When we say cheaper, how is it cheaper? No, it is actually cheaper
Yeah.
compared to
Yep.
many other I quote unquote Ivy leagues and whatnot. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of like paying 200,000 for an education. Pretty much you can, uh, right? I mean, what you get end of your education is basically a neat certificate printed in like italics and things like that with beautiful calligraphy, and then you're paying 200,000 for it. I mean, to me, when I think back, I'm 40 years old right now. To me, it doesn't make any sense. If I have to do it again, probably I wouldn't do it. So that's where I am. When we face a book, I would challenge anyone. I'm happy to debate them on it, and then I would win the argument. I know that. So
Yeah. So I think
it's
that's an interesting point. I think one of the things that COVID did, that COVID brought to light, was a lot of people. I remember seeing this viral tweet that Harvard students are actually paying $40,000 for a Netflix subscription, because if you're
yeah.
paying that amount of money and you aren't even there, you're just looking at video lectures. That is
Yeah.
what made a lot of people really put things
How is
into
it different from Udemy or
right.
Coursera? Right?
Exactly.
And you know what I'm talking about. So, uh,
Exactly.
how is it even different? And all your, I mean, and all your sharing is knowledge, and of course, Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like, I mean, the way I see it, there's a lot of entitlement going on in terms of like charging a premium just because it's a quote unquote Ivy League or whatever. I love the campuses. It's great. I've been to Harvard. It's great. I took a picture next to the founder. It's
Uh-huh.
amazing, right? But also looking at facts and statistics, the education institutions, especially in the US, are one of the most uh, institutions sitting with the largest bank accounts, right?
Correct.
With
Yes.
solid cash pile of cash sitting like in billions of dollars, right? I mean, like, why?
Yeah.
That's yeah. That's
It's a
I
good
don't think
point.
there is any justification to it.
Yeah. I read somewhere that the reason why that is because at least when these institutes, or maybe the better term would be machines, were first conceptualized, these were
Right.
machines of senators and presidents. So that's what the machine was manufacturing. They couldn't care less if if you were a big cancer researcher, but what they looked for was your potential to become a U.S. senator one day. And if you did have that potential, they would take you in because as senator, guess who where you would redirect your funds to? It would be to your obviously your alma mater. So that again,
Right.
that you could chalk that under the conspiracy theory file, but it was just something that I read that I felt was interesting. And now they've moved away from that in with the STEMification that's gone on. They very clearly are
Right.
now optimizing for not doing that and more so doing stuff around STEM. So yeah,
Yeah.
maybe that's just a failing world order in that way, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, there's a lot of things that needs to be corrected around us, and like this is just one of them. And education is is a topic I'm really passionate about, and I can talk about more. I'll talk about that for hours. So, but let's move on and like let's go to more other interesting things. I mean, what's going on with the 90s kids thing? Because like my brother, he was born early 90s as well, and I speak to so many others, and I mean, I really love them. I like people a lot. I mean,
Uh-huh.
let me say that first. I like people a lot, and then everyone are like brothers and sisters to me. So I really believe in that. But something I keep hearing in terms of in social media or otherwise. I mean, some things I've noted is like, I'll never be able to afford a house with these prices. I mean, these are quotes, right?
Ah,
Why is my degree not enough to land a decent job?
yeah.
Okay. Why is everyone else on social media doing better than me? Right? And it
Hmm.
feels impossible to keep up with all the information and trends. Why does it take up so much? Why does work take up so much of my life? These are some real quotes by real people.
Yep.
I mean, I thought I would ask another 90s person so that like they have answers to it, at least some of them.
Yeah, I wish I had answers to those. I guess
That's
what I
fine.
can say, no, but I think that's such a great point that you're raising, Vijay. Especially because I think, see, it has factually, at least in my opinion, gotten
Yeah,
harder to get a job, to save money, to
100%.
buy a house. I think all of those
100%.
are empirically true to some level,
Right.
at least.
Yeah.
Where things get a little muddled up, I think also is that the way money is spent, or the way really just financial intelligence that used to be around maybe 30 years ago, is very different from the way it is right now. And then if you on
Yeah.
top of that, if you start comparing financial behaviors in the US versus those in India, that's also a very separate conversation altogether. So at least in the
Right.
US, the sense I get is that a few when you turn whatever 21 and you, or maybe 26, because that's when you get bumped off your parents' health insurance. That's when people realize that there's actually no point in saving money because you can barely save anything anyway. So let's just go all
Right.
in. Let's just get takeout every weekend. Let's just go on that vacation. Let's just enjoy life. And then when
Right.
you do that for long enough, suddenly, well, no surprises, you don't have money to buy a house unless you're like some top 1% tech bro, or tech gal, or
Mm.
you get what I mean. So I
Right.
think there's fault, quote unquote, on both sides. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's just my, I feel lucky to have somewhat conservative spending habits. Like, I don't really
Right.
eat out that much. I actually enjoy cooking. I don't mind finding the two things that I can make that I enjoy. so that I can just make them pretty much every day if I had to and not get sick of it. I think that's a huge
Got it.
privilege that I have. But again,
Got
it
it.
really just depends on the person. I have nothing against another person that likes to go to see the pyramids of Giza every year in March. Like, sure, you do you, but
Yeah.
there's consequences of the
I have
choices
a
that you
podcast to
make.
record.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like when you're in visa, I have my podcast schedules coming up and things like that. I mean, just for fun. I mean, I get
Yeah.
it. I mean, in terms of like rising costs, of course, it is a concern, and I think some of these questions are valid as much as they are. Some of are humorous, but at the same time, they are very much valid. And have you ever like introspected or your friend circle? Yeah, there is a rising cost of living. Have you ever thought about like why that is the case? Like ever? Uh, have you introspected that to a next level?
Uh,
Why? Like, have you asked that question?
yeah, I have, and it's not necessarily something that I've discussed with friends as much as just some reading that I've done. Again, I'm really curious as a person. I My goal, in part with the podcast, also with Ready Set Do, is to eventually get to a point where I just know everything about everything. Like, I know that it sounds like a joke, but that's really what I have in terms of a vision for myself. That's where I want to
Right,
get at. So with all that
right,
said, I think the biggest black box that a lot of this is chalked up to is just inflation. Like, people just like to slap that label and be like, "Oh, every 7 years stuff doubles. That's just life." What are you
right.
going to do about that? And while
Yeah,
that's true, I do definitely think there are some other factors that maybe don't get a lot of attention as they used to. So again, this is very difficult for various geographies. For the US, at least, this is known and this is pretty well documented that inflation is high. Like, when I first came to the US, I'm a big milk fan, probably get some shade for that, but I just like drinking milk. I used to pay less than $2 for a gallon of whole milk, red cap, in 2020. Now I can't seem to get it anywhere for like less than five. So, and it's been not 7 years, and like the price there, and I know this is anecdotal and not at all the overarching point that I'm trying to make, but it has more than doubled in this particular very selective situation. So I think at the end of the day, you kind of have to. The only thing you can do from my POV is, if you can't worry about lowering the floor, why don't you focus on raising the ceiling? So
right.
if independence is really what you're seeking, and if people are making you pay whatever $10 for a gallon of milk, how about you just earn more money? And I know that's way too simplistic, and it's
Right.
I don't want to give any bad notions about, hey, how is he making it sound so easy? Like, if it's so easy, why don't you do it? Well,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm trying to figure that out, but I think step one is still at least not just putting ourselves as the victim and just
yeah.
existing. Like, there's nothing you can do about a lot of the stuff that goes on in the world. A lot of the stuff you see on social media is actually
Right,
just a time sink for you and an effort sink, more importantly. So once you
right.
rise above all that, once you just not spend 4 hours doom scrolling and actually spend time on working on yourself and trying to understand how you can build wealth, how you can raise the ceiling, as I said,
Yeah.
that's where the magic really starts to happen.
Okay, got it. I'll give my like 2 cents take on that. Just
Yeah,
just for
please.
anyone listening, I think it will be valuable because like compare that to China, right? I mean, in terms of like China, the affordability is super high, and in terms of like everything that we get here in the Western world, it's pretty much like at least 90-95% produced in China. And
Uh-huh.
I'm not rooting for China here because yeah, there are a lot. Like, I'm not rooting for China at all, but at the same time, I'm talking about affordability point of view. 10, 20 years, 30, 40 years ago, like pretty much everything was affordable in the US. US dollar was much more, like the worth of US dollars was much higher and things like that. So what has happened of late, I mean, the best example, you might have gone to the DMV office to get a driver's license, I suppose. I
Yeah,
mean, it might have been like either a great experience or a pathetic experience, but like pretty much you can tell how that's like a miniature of a government, how it functions and things like that, right?
that's
So
true. That's
basically
a
what
great
has
point.
happened to these, right? So what has happened to these developed economies, right? To these Western nations is not the US. I'm also observing the similar facts in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, UK. UK, oh my goodness, like people. yeah, there's a lot to talk about UK as well. But at the same time, it has grown into a behemoth of these larger organizations and government bureaucracies and things like that. So the reason for inflation is because you are producing less value but spending more. Right, you should be
Right.
doing the reverse,
Yeah.
actually creating more value, like what China is doing, for instance.
Correct.
Right, they're creating more value and
Absolutely.
spending less. And in here in the US, it's pretty much the opposite. And you're
Mhm.
pretty much spending a lot and then creating very less value. Of course, US is creating a lot of value, no doubt about that. But at the same time, on a proportion basis, like,
Mhm.
so the government is basically the 10x or 100x of how the DMV operates,
Right.
right, as a whole. So that's the problem. So that is the huge. That's where oh yeah, let's pass a bill and spend $1 trillion for this. Let's pass a bill and spend $100 billion. I mean, someone told me, correct me for, I don't know, don't call me out on this, but at the same time, they spent 10 years and probably spent around $16 billion or $20 billion. I could be wrong in the numbers, but this was basically the railway between San Francisco and LA.
Oh, right, right. I do
And,
remember. I actually think it
and
was something in the billions, actually. That's what I
in
saw.
billions, yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably hundreds of billions, right? And all that is built was 500 meters or 200 or less than two
Yeah.
kilometers worth of the railway over 10 years,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That's so that is why when we ask where is all the money going, I have no idea. So this is
Yeah.
real value out of it. Like we are probably creating 0.1% of value and spending 99.9% on like bureaucracy and everything that you shouldn't be spending on. So that is the problem. At least as far as I know, I was not given financial education when I grew up in the school, in the college. So all of this is like you figuring out shit. So that's where this is coming from.
No,
So anyone listening,
I think that's a really cool perspective, especially in terms of just understanding in a very fundamental manner how or what forces drive these things that we keep hearing, such as inflation. It's always a counterweight against something else. It's not, you can't just inspect one thing for itself and be like, oh,
right?
that's the guilty party. There's always other things that you need to look at. So that's why I think I really like your POV on this, because it just inherently makes a lot of sense just in a logical manner.
Right. One other topic I'd like to get into is like, of course, in terms of like entrepreneurship. I'm sure like I read in your was while I was like preparing for the interview. You have approached different ideas. What was your learning from your prior experiences? Because like I'm a huge believer of failure. Because like if you're not failing enough, it means you're not trying hard. If you're not, it means you're not trying at all, right? So I like failure for one reason, because that is the best teacher. You can spend 6 months in a semester and not learn anything, but at the same time, failure is one of the best teachers that you will never forget the lesson. Right. So I love failures in that way. And I'd like to try more things. And like, yeah, I'm failing. It's great. I don't mind trying it out and failing. And I think a series of failures is probably get you to something newer. And yeah, so I so push people to try new things and have them
Uh-huh.
fail, because from a conservative society where in the South Asian, even in China or India, the way it is like, oh, all you have to do is succeed, right? That is a very long way of looking at life. Because if you're always rooting for succeeding, yes, you have to succeed, but at the same time, if you're not having the courage to try new things and fail, of course, failure is part of the journey, not the destination itself, right? So, how was that
Absolutely.
entrepreneurship and things that you learned from your failures? I'm more curious about the lessons that you learned.
Yeah, I think the biggest story that comes to mind in terms of failure is in my sophomore year, along with four other friends, um, I helped start this social enterprise. This company, it was
Mm-hmm.
called Samvedna. We were based out of Bangalore at the time, and what we were trying to do, or what our idea was that, you know, maybe you don't, but the way recycling works in India is like, eventually you have your newspapers coming in, and after 2 months there's like a big pile, and then whoever, the child is in the house, or whoever has some off time, takes it to the, repair, not repair, sorry, but the recycle wala person, and then they weigh whatever you take take in terms of paper weight, and then they give you whatever 20 rupees or some small amount for that. And
Right.
usually, at least that's how it worked for me, is that because I was the child that used to do this, that 20 rupees is just for me to buy a fruity and a Lay's packet of chips, and that's it. It's gone.
R-
It's in thin air now.
Right.
So our
Right.
idea was now to do this in extremely densely populated housing complexes in Bangalore. So we would have like one truck that would go in. We would then go door to door, collect everybody's recyclables. And here's the catch: what we would do then is, instead of that money just being lost forever, is that we would invest that for a child's education that needs education, or you could basically pick whichever social enterprise you would want to help, and you would be able to track and see where exactly the money that was collected from your complex went and who it helped. So like
Got
that
it.
was the idea behind it, and we secured funding for it as well. We spoke to the founder of Youth for Seva Bangalore, which is a really big NGO actually in Bangalore. They have chapters all over India, but we pitched to the founder who was in our college for a talk. So that's how we got our in with him. So then me and another friend of mine, we went and pitched to him, and he agreed to fund us for an initial amount of, I think it was 50,000 rupees. And all was going well, except and after working hard on it, I built like the term sheet and such. Maybe not the term sheet, but more like the business model, I guess. We just crunched a bunch of numbers on Excel. What we realized, however, was the only way that this would work is if we dropped out of college. Like that was just the reality of the situation. Now I think maybe we could have been able to make it work. I don't know. I will never know. There is no way to know. But that hit us, at least it hit me personally very deeply, because it was something I believed in a lot. It was like, my baby. I really wanted it to succeed. And yet, despite doing everything right, despite putting in all the work, all the effort that I possibly could, a lot of my decisions were probably wrong, given I was all of what, 19 at the time, or 20.
Quick question. Quick question. Didn't mean to interrupt. Quick question. You said like it would have worked only because only if you dropped out. That is because of the existing commitments at the university, at the college, or lack of time availability. Is that the reason, or
Yeah, that's basically it. So what we would have to do is, you can't project manage this stuff. You have to be in the lorry
right, right,
that
right?
goes inside that apartment. You need to be
Of
knocking all those
course,
doors, talking to people. Like
of
we
course.
couldn't employ people to do that, and it wouldn't even work if we did that, because it needs to come from the founder. At least that's what I believe. If you have a middleman, they're not interested. They don't care about your vision. They're just there to draw their salary. So for it to really work, you need your founders on the ground doing this type of thing, and we just couldn't.
Got it.
Like you still have 75% mandatory attendance in India. Like how am I going to
Yeah,
do
yeah,
get
yeah.
that and also be doing this half the time?
Right, right. Of course, yeah. So that was so. What was the lesson like from that experience?
The lesson was, if you really believe in something, you will fight against the entire world for it. And what I learned from that was that maybe on some level deep down, I didn't trust it enough to give what I had going in terms of my comfortable excuse me, college degree and all of that. So
Right.
that was my lesson. Like it just never was meant to be, because I didn't believe in it enough. So I was in fact the problem. It was not what I had thought all these years, that, oh, if the load was too much, whatever, blah blah. It's
Got
just
it.
all excuses. The reality of
It's a
it is that I wasn't ready myself. That was
it's
the
a conviction
learning.
question of conviction and
Exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
got it. I can keep going. Real question like, do you want to break? You want like water or something, and like we can we can
I just have
continue.
to
No
blow
problem.
my nose.
Yeah. Go ahead. Like yeah. No problem. Take it out.
All right. I'm all set again.
Yeah, good. Yeah, please feel free to stop me even 100 times again.
No, that was actually the
I'm
perfect
all
time
good.
you interrupted.
I
Yep,
have all the
perfect.
time. You're good. Okay, fine. Okay, how are we doing with time? I have all the time. How is your time doing? You're good.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I have nowhere else to be. I'm really enjoying this. This just feels like, catching up with an old friend. So, not too keen to cut this short. Yeah, this is great.
Got it. Got it. No, it's because like the way I mean, the way I get into conversation with people is like, it's not like I want to extract this X, Y, and Z from this person. And then what I try is like, oh yeah, here's this person, and like, and then because like I meet so many people from India, otherwise, and so many others, and like every person I've got to know them, they're pretty much the same, Naman, except they look and speak differently or dress differently. That's about it. And
Really
but the
interesting.
people are really good. I mean, they have a lot of like good aspirations, and they have a good like learning experiences. They've gone through a lot of things in their life, and of course they have a lot to share. So share, and some are like super extrovert, some are like super introvert, and it's sometimes like they're in a different journey, and everyone's journey is it's very special to them and for others. And yeah, so that's where I come from. So it's like, yeah, even any person watches this and then gets to know, oh, here's Naman from India, and he pursued his education in the US, and anyone going through a similar journey, yeah, if they get any value out of it, that's great.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
the thing. I mean, that's all it is about. But so you have a fascinating resume, and you have a great bio, and you have tried different things, which is like, yeah, I can talk to you for hours, man. So yeah, that's good. And
Appreciate
then
that.
I love your
Likewise.
answers too. I love your answers too. I mean, like it's very passionate. They're deep and they're personal. So I love all of your answers too.
Yeah, one thing that you
So
had said that stuck to me, Vijay, that I was thinking about just before this call was you had said that you like to have deep conversations and not surface level stuff. And I think
no,
that's a really great thing that you shared with me because I do believe in that a lot. So I've
right.
I've been trying extra a little bit to not give you surface level stuff and really dig deep in terms of my responses. So I'm glad that,
Yeah, yeah,
at
yeah.
least it's shining through. One last thing before I let you continue. I am happy to
Yeah.
talk about like in terms of my podcasting journey and such, if at all that's
Yes.
something that you would want to get into a little bit more.
100%. 100%.
But also anything else is still also obviously on the table. That was just a recommendation that you can,
Yeah.
feel free to do
Yeah.
whatever you want with that.
Sure. Let's dive into your podcast. I have, of course, other questions, but let's dive into your podcasting journey, and then maybe we can come back to other
Yeah,
topics.
that
There are so
works.
many others that we can always come back to other topics. But yeah, I mean, just to uh, talk about deep or not, but things. The reason I even share that is because there are so many surface level conversations you hear from anyone listening. We had our prior conversation, but anyone listening might find it valuable, I think, because like there are so many surface level conversations already in the society, pretty much at work or anywhere you go. And the good mornings and the good nights and the good days are great. But at the same time, I think uh, people, I think something that they appreciate is like genuine authenticity and love. I mean, when we say love, it's kind of twisted in how they. I mean, maybe I can say passion and affection. This is also like love towards your product, love towards your service,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
so I think that is what I think is lacking in society, because everything cannot be corporatized. Everything cannot
true.
be, you cannot bring bureaucracy into everything. You cannot bring. I mean, you cannot politicize every conversation, right? So there are real people, and there are real and they feel a lot. They have a lot of emotions, and I think when people see real, authentic conversation, and why do you think? Because like, look at this. I mean, I was so fascinated even to see the podcast space evolve, like it is evolving right now. And when I saw TikTok, oh, thought the attention span is going to be probably 15 or 5 seconds or 10 seconds. I'm not in TikTok first of all, so I don't know
Me
what the
neither.
shortest form of
I've
clip
never
is.
had a TikTok. Yeah,
I don't know what the shortest form of clip is. 2 seconds, 5 seconds. I don't know. Right?
I don't know.
look at podcasts. People are literally sitting and then watching for an hour or so, or even hours together. And with the Joe Rogans and so many others doing, Andrew Huberman that you mentioned, they're watching hours together, and then the lack of authentic conversation was lacking in society, and podcast was kind of providing that. And I think people seem to pay attention to it. So that's what it is. Okay, going to Ravi said do podcasting. So why don't Shari tell us all about that?
Yeah, we're really happy to always talk about it. It's, it's like my labor of love. So, from as far back as I can remember, I have loved YouTube. I have grown up on YouTube. I've lived on YouTube. So, I always knew that in some shape, size, way, or form, I wanted to have a YouTube channel. I was just too afraid, really, just because of the spotlight effect, which, in case somebody isn't aware, it's just that feeling that whatever you're doing is being inspected really closely by strangers, or even people that you know.
Right.
Except it's not true at all. Most people are so busy with just their own lives that they really couldn't care less what somebody else is doing. It's like 1 second of thought, and then that's it, like it's gone, and you are not doing this thing that you like to do or you want to do and are really passionate about doing, because you fear that some stranger, or your what somebody you think your friend is, that's not even actually your friend, might worry about it for 1 second. So it took me about 4 years to realize this rather academic fact now, it feels like. But when I did eventually realize that, I knew that I kind of, through some introspection, merged that with the way I learn, which is not by being told by an expert that, hey, do A, B, and C. Like, that's just not how I operate. I don't enjoy that. I'm just a person that really likes to make my own decisions. And I also have learned rather recently that about 95% of the advice that you get from somebody is actually just bogus. A lot of get rich quick schemes are people just trying to
Yeah.
sell you their lottery ticket. Like, they won that
Right.
lottery once. That number is not going to work for you. What you need is what they did when they were starting out, or at least were towards the middle phases of their journey. That's something that maybe 5% is replicable for you. So all of those kind of different worlds collided in various ways and gave birth to the idea behind Ready Set Do. And the way the launch happened was actually also kind of a funny story. So one of my very close friends from school, his name is Anand Chajar. He's a really big education content creator. He's based out of India. He's an IIM Ahmedabad grad, which, as you might know, is the most elite B school in the country. And then he then started making content around, helping others to get into CAT and all of those things. So his reels used to blow up and show up on my feed, and I just couldn't believe that he was, doing so well, and I was so happy for him. So when
Right.
that idea was first born in my head, I just reached out to him. We hadn't connected in over, I don't know, 4 years or something. And I was like,
Right.
hey, do you want to talk about what you've done on this show with me? Because he's definitely not an expert. At that time, he was about 1 year into his journey. So he was like, yeah,
Right.
sure, man, I'll do it. So we recorded that episode. I had no plans. I didn't even have the name decided at the time. And I just then kind of forced myself to, in the next week, design the logo, come up with a name, because those two go hand in hand. Obviously, you can't have a logo without a name. And then,
Right.
but I actually ended up uploading that recording on Spotify by mistake. And as you might
Right.
know, but maybe not a lot of others do, Spotify does not let you delete an episode of your podcast if it's the only episode of your podcast. You have to delete the entire podcast. So
Okay. I haven't
here I
tried that, but like,
was.
yeah.
Yeah, so here I was having just
Right.
uploaded this episode to my, newborn Spotify podcast with no way of being able to delete that. So I was like,
Yeah.
well, I guess we're live, and it was a Wednesday. So I was like, okay, I guess we're doing every Wednesday. We have to have episodes now. So that same weekend, I
Right.
tracked down another friend, forced them to record an episode with me
Track
just
down a
so I
friend.
couldn't miss my kid.
I love
Yeah,
that.
no, truly. Shout out to Pragya, who was my colleague at PwC and then came to the
Right.
US at UT Dallas. She's at Amazon now. But anyway, so yeah,
Right.
she was thankfully willing to partner with me on this. And that's how the
Right.
second episode happened. And then, yeah, really the only metric I ever optimized for was, I'm not going to miss an upload every Wednesday. I don't care if it gets
Mm.
one view. That's fine. I really genuinely don't
Right.
actually care. my failure metric is if there is no upload on a Wednesday, that's failure for me. So
Right.
yeah, that's, I don't know. I know that was a bit of a ramble, so apologies, but
No,
that's
no,
how it
not
all
at all.
started.
Not at all. I mean, like, there is a book by, I think, written by Michael Dell, and it's on my reading list, but I like the title itself. It says Only the Paranoid Survive. So, I mean, every idea, I mean, even though it looks like crazy to others, it's like, yeah, I mean, like, people who achieve great things, they are paranoid about certain things, and they are, and the passion, like, it just takes you to the journey is what I've seen to be more exciting than the destination itself.
That's very true.
Right? I mean,
Process over
I've read this a
goals.
lot. Yeah, I've read this about this a lot, but I'm personally experiencing it every day because the journey is so fascinating. It's that
Uh-huh.
I'm, yeah, destination. I'm not thinking about 10 years from now. No, I'm just thinking about today. This conversation. Okay, I'm talking to Naman, and like, okay, let's have a good conversation. That's all. Right. So tell me about, like, what are some, like, fascinating uh, conversations or
Hmm?
topics that you had on your pen?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, that was a really big unintended bonus for me. I actually had no idea just by having these conversations with these strangers more often than not. I myself would be learning so much. Like somehow that's, I know it seems like a duh, but it just completely glossed over my head altogether. So when it first started
Right.
happening, I was like, this is crazy. I nobody warned me about this. This is the greatest side effect ever. So
Right.
one of the biggest things that has stuck, and I was actually talking to my brother about this, who was trying to understand this
Yeah.
exact phenomenon, is really the difference between American culture and Indian culture. So I had a
Right.
psychologist, a PhD in psychology on my channel, Dr. Aditi Paul. She has an EP1. She has a company, Dr. Paul and Company. She helps immigrants take
Right.
control of their lives and not be in the whole H1B debacle for 100 years or whatever. Really amazing, such a
Of
well read
course.
person. So she was
Right.
sharing that from her research, she learned that the way to distill, if you had to distill in towards both of these cultures, Indian
Right.
culture is extremely context based, whereas American culture is extremely verbal based. So here you might have a husband and wife that even after 40 years of being together, the wife audibly says thank you every time the husband does something for her. That just
Right.
does not happen in India because ours is a much more contextual culture. So, say if a husband makes tea for the wife, that is his way of sharing, saying thanks or whatever, I love you or whatever. But he won't
Yeah.
be able to verbalize that as much or as well as Americans do. And then once you
Mm.
realize that, a lot of the key differences in both of those cultures can actually be traced back to just those two words, which, at least for me personally, it blew my mind in that just how simple that whole thing was and how it was even possible to reduce effectively two cultures into two words. So that was really cool.
Right.
And then obviously there's a few others. So I had this guest who's been to about 50 countries. She was teaching me about, or teaching our listeners about, affordable traveling tricks. And one of the things she said was
Affordable traveling. Sorry. Affordable.
traveling tricks, like just tips
Oh,
and
traveling
tricks
tricks.
for,
Okay. Got it.
yeah.
Got it.
So
Got it.
one of the really, again, a lot of these maybe sound like dirt to listeners, and I apologize if they do. They weren't for me, so I'm
No.
sharing them.
No. No.
But
No.
she said that a lot of people confound staying, or like just where you stay versus where you travel as two different things. They don't always need to be two different things. So what she said was, say you're, again, this was affordable travel, keep in mind. So if you're one of those five-star hotel residents, you will probably not enjoy this. But she was giving the example of when she was in Northern Europe. I think she was trying to go from Norway to somewhere, and she realized that instead of staying overnight at a hotel, she could just go on a cruise that would take her for throughout that night to her new place wherever she wanted to go, and that would also cover her accommodation. So you can then extrapolate that to, say you're in South India, you're trying to go to Kerala from Bangalore. Instead of
Yeah.
flying or taking a flight, why don't you just take an overnight bus that covers both
Yeah.
of your transportation, as well as you don't need to book a hotel that night. So
Right.
again, my guests are so diverse. I had an IIM Ahmedabad professor who was talking about why diversity is so important. And I've never, obviously, everybody knows what diversity is, and we all have our versions for
Right.
why it's important. But the way he articulated in his world why it's so important just blew me away. And yeah, I could go on, but because my guests are so diverse, it's kind of difficult to limit it to one aspect. I just learned a lot of things from talking to
Got
them,
it. Got
and
it.
hopefully, long may it continue.
Got it. Got it. I mean, like, I'm learning the podcasting experience. I love it. I mean, I don't. I mean, identifying itself a podcaster is like, I don't know if I'm proud or not, but at the same time, I'm loving it, man. I'm just having
You should be
one
proud.
conversation.
There aren't a
Uh,
lot of podcasters in the world, my friend.
uh, uh, no, I mean, honestly, because like I haven't. I haven't scheduled myself for that every Wednesday thing. I told even my wife I was not going to do that, and not because of a commitment phobic or anything like that. I have no problem with that, but at the same time. I should feel that I should need to have that conversation, right? You know what I mean? It
Hmm.
should not be a oh yeah, it's a Monday morning. Show up at like a 9 to 5, right? I mean, like you have to show up. There's a client meeting. No, I don't want to feel that because then what I lose is being. I mean, when I started this conversation, I said like, sorry, man, I am late because I had this coffee because I was enjoying this coffee, but at the same time, I didn't mean to make you wait. But that's the reason I explained it. But I'm saying there shouldn't be a push for me to force a conversation. That's my take on it. Force to do something for just because. I didn't take the time, but that's me. I have this crazy dude like saying all this like random POVs like to say it, but like, but that's me, man. Again, I'm
That's a
so
very interesting point.
I
Yeah,
cannot
if
be
I
time
may,
bossed. I cannot
yeah,
be time bossed. I don't like that.
right. That makes the only thing I'll say to that is I struggled with that as well, and my way of optimizing for that is was by having systems that force me to only have conversations that I want to have. So once
Right.
you make sure of that, then you kind of eliminate the problem where you're suddenly stuck on a call with somebody that you
Yeah. Yeah.
don't care about or you don't even want to talk to. So for
Okay.
me, it was a skill issue, if that makes sense.
Got it. Got it. No, no. I'm after I think a lot of like COVID and so many others. I think what I've started to appreciate and gratitude, right? I mean, appreciate is like the everyday. I mean, I so enjoy the curry that my wife makes. All right, I so enjoy the day. I mean, I enjoy having my morning coffee and things like that. And these are not luxury, right? I mean, whether you are in any part of the world, millions of people drink coffee and like are you really enjoying it or you're just like sipping it in and then like going and sitting in a desk and then spending the next 8 hours, right? So
Hmm.
that's yeah, I don't want to do that. And then I've moved away from a lot of like the taboos or the social norms, as you would say. So yeah, I would pretty much like yeah, reject it and then ask, introspect it and ask a question why, and then finally arrive at my own answer and when I'm
Got it.
convinced on that. So
That's really
that's
cool, actually.
it is painful also, man, for some people
Yeah,
around me
no,
as well.
that's
When
true. Hey,
I mean, if someone goes and asks my wife the same question, I mean, like she would have a totally different version, I promise. But at the same time, I think it's all worth it because people should introspect the questions. Inflation, for instance, that like you and I spoke about. I mean,
yeah,
so many other things that we don't often think about, right? Why is money like this? What is money and things like that? And so many, I like Bitcoin and things like. I mean, like there are so many questions that forms a rigid opinion over centuries, right? Sometimes it becomes centuries worth of opinions that people just carry forward for no good reason, right? Because I was having this conversation with Tamina the other day. Tamina, she's a coach, she's a director at Coke in,
cool.
in our pod, and she mentioned like, yeah, I'm come from India, and at the same time there are so many things that comes with the culture. I like to keep the things that are still working for me, but at the same time I'd like to also share a few things that
Hmm.
are not working for me, right? I think that is great. Yeah, keep people can definitely keep what they want to keep and what is working for them, right? So
Yeah, very
that's
true.
Yeah. So one of the topic I wanted to really ask you is because like this is, and I think we share common threads on that is because moving on to a different topic, and of course, thanks for sharing your information about the pod, and of course, we'll put a plug right as we close. But this is another topic that I like to introspect is about freedom and the concept of like quote unquote freedom itself. And there's a different ways that people narrate it, pursuing an American dream and things like that. But overall, uh, how has the concept of freedom evolved as a society in the East, in South Asia, and India, and how has that basically addressed here in the US? It's very different, right? The concept of freedom is defined. The definition of freedom itself is very different in both the worlds, right? How do you see that?
So when you say freedom, are you referring to the civic definition of freedom, or are you referring to the more personal definition of freedom?
Hmm. Uh, when I say freedom, freedom to, of course, speak, freedom to do the things that you would like to do, freedom to not be dictated by entities or institutions or governments and
Mhm.
things like that,
I see.
and societal policing. Right, those are not freedoms, right? I mean, there's a lot of societal
Mhm.
policing on like on various things in societies.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it is good and bad, right? I mean, freedom. I mean, when you understand freedom, it's there's good and bad to it, but obviously there's a lot of good. That's why I think people love freedom. So my personal feeling was the way it was interpreted. The interpretation was very different in India, and it's often that kids in India are not taught the definition of freedom enough. In an early age, right?
Mhm.
I've seen people like totally not even realizing there's something like that exists, and then like spending their entire 70, 80 years of life, and then like, right? So that's,
Mhm.
you understand? You understand the
Yeah,
question now?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for me, I think so. A Charles Bukowski quote comes to mind, and I really hope I'm not butchering this, but I think the quote is, "If you are alone just by yourself at 2 a.m. on some night and nobody in the world knows where you are you lonely or are you free?" So I think
Hmm.
what it says is that there's a very thin line between freedom being a really important and a really great thing and the lack of it becoming a really bad thing is, I guess, the way I like to view, or at least the lens that I like to view this problem from. So as far as the civic definition goes, I think I actually really admire the way America goes about this. What I'm getting at is the really just the American Constitution is built around the almost this weird understanding. At least this is my take, and it could be incorrect, but it's the fact that the people of this country make this country. The government is there to serve the people, which again, I know it sounds like a lot of boilerplate for any constitution in the world, but I think the
That's
way
fine. Go
that
ahead.
it's implemented in America is especially more catered towards um, individual liberties, which is in a way just another way of saying individual freedoms. So I think that's where all the discussion around guns and such come in. Like, again, I don't want to go on record about that at all, but all I'm saying is if it's enshrined in the constitution of a country, if it's almost celebrated that you should probably have guns, just because what will you do if the government turns on you? That's something I think which is very unique to America. I don't think any other country in the world has that. So that is a definition of freedom. Now, if you now look at India, we have a very different definition in that because of just when we got our independence, it was way too late. We were one of the last countries to, not be colonized by the British. And
Right.
at least the immediate aftermath of that was also not us, you know, unlocking new frontiers in terms of economies and all of those things. We were behind in a lot of ways. We were just shackled by problems, by people. Again, that's a whole separate discussion altogether. But I think what that does is it instills a scarcity mindset almost in the people, where if you don't even know where your next meal is coming from, you probably don't care about your freedom that much. Like, you
Yeah.
would want to
Yeah.
first
I
optimize
agree.
for
That's right.
Pavlov's, not Pavlov, sorry, what's the guy that has the pyramid? Do you know what I'm talking about?
The
The
pyramid, like the Egypt.
No, the hierarchy of needs. Maslow is the, so there's
Okay.
a hierarchy of needs where it's food, it's housing, and then
Okay.
you have your
Oh
stuff
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
respect
Yeah.
and all of those,
Got it.
freedom, all of those things. So I think that's
Right.
where
Right.
the biggest difference lies in my head, at least, is that America, a lot of problems in America are problems of abundance, whereas a lot of problems in
Mm,
India are problems of scarcity. So we're just really fighting different wars, if you think about it that way. But
yeah.
what that also does is it gives that discussion around freedom also an apples to oranges type flavor. It's just freedom means very different things in both of those countries. I am curious to hear your take on this, though.
On this, yeah, because like I was like really taken aback in terms of the definition that was given while growing up. I never understood the concept of freedom while I was growing up. And of course, scarcity is a big need. Oh, are you going to get water today or not? Is electricity is going to be down for a couple of days, and what are we going to
Exactly.
do about it? And okay, and like things like that. So the basic necessities of everyday life, I think, keeps people busy in pretty much not being able to think about pretty much anything. Yeah, I'm getting the food and I'm cooking it, I'm eating it, going to school, going to work, and coming back, and when will you actually be free, right? I mean, so the concept was never enshrined in people and never broadcasted in a sense that it
Hmm.
is
Right.
being spoken about in the West.
Yep.
Because when you're, I mean, they say the when you know the truth will set you free. So
Hmm.
I'm a person who pursues truth like crazy. I get into so many rabbit holes and things like that. I mean, I don't bring conspiracy theories or anything into the conversation, but at the same time, I've tried to understand, and people started having like their own version of truth these days, Naman. So, but at the same time, I can fairly strike a balance. I mean, at least to my personal satisfaction, I can strike a balance in terms of, okay, fine, these are things I can really believe on, and I believe to
Hmm.
be true, and these are things that I don't believe to be true. Right. So,
Yeah.
and that I think kind of gives a sense of freedom, and then what you can say and cannot say. Take social media for instance, and there's a lot of like cancel culture. Is that the right word? I don't know. Cancel culture.
It is. Yeah.
And
Yep.
if you say something, uh, and if you say certain things, you can be cancelled, and your account can be suppressed, and things like that. And I don't think that is legal in first place when it comes to US, because the First Amendment and things like that, it's a freedom of speech. Obviously, they are violating it big time, and yeah, and who are these entities or people to say what is misinformation or disinformation, whatever the crap that is, and then who are they to judge, right? That's my question. And yeah, I mean, like they were brave enough to even shut down accounts of presidents and so many people, not just like one person, so many people, right? So anything you say or anything you question, uh, you are basically publicly shamed, and you're called a conspiracy theorist. You're called whatever. You're basically given names to shame people in public, right? So that's what
Hmm.
happens. So that tells me there is truth to it. So, and when people basically challenge certain things, it doesn't mean they are the wrong people, right? I mean, obviously, and then when you go to a restaurant and have a food and someone comes and asks, I'm like, sometimes you say it, sometimes you don't say it. Sometimes the food is awful, right? So you don't say it. But at the same time, when you're having a conversation with your friend, hey, man, this tastes awful, that doesn't mean that is wrong, right? I
Yeah.
mean, right? So it's as simple as that. I'm trying to probably oversimplify, but at the same time, there are larger point of views, larger truths in the society that is being shut down, which is not appreciated well. So yeah, I mean, it's not just freedom of speech. You spoke about gun ownership and things like that, and yeah, and I have a different point of view on that. Totally different, but yeah, I mean, it has to be addressed from a very young age so that people understand what is freedom. You want to go and pursue
Yeah.
something, say something, you should be able to have that freedom to explore certain things. And when you explore hundreds of things, you'll have a lot of point of views, a lot of opinions, and opinions change over a period of time. You should be able to communicate that. And if you're not able to communicate that, in a public forum or anything like that. And I think that is lacking freedom. And it's like I mean, don't get me wrong, because like you in India, there are a lot of other freedoms that you don't need actually. I mean, you can go on a highway and then probably throw trash and then you can get away with it. Right? And nobody questions that. That is not freedom to me, right? That is, yeah, I am not like India's getting much better country these days and they're rooting for the 2036 Olympics. And I'm super proud of what India is and what it is getting. But at the same time, the concept of freedom as a whole that was defined in the East versus West is very different. And I think people, for humanity to have a better life, I think they need to really understand what freedom means to them. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think I'm mostly track with what you just laid out there. I think that makes sense.
All right, all good. So sorry for my long rant, but I yeah, that's what I felt top of my
No,
head right now, at least.
I
So
think it
that's
was
all.
all very relevant. I didn't think it was, any tangent. There were no tangents there at all.
Yeah. So how was so you had a lot of time that you spent on blockchain, right? I mean, you I read in your profile as I
Hmm.
was scanning it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like I didn't spend days researching it, but at the same time, please correct me any wrong information. So you spent time on blockchain while
that's right.
doing your consulting journey. How was that journey, Naman? Because that is an evolving tech, and like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny you say evolving tech right now in
It
2024
has
when,
evolved also, yeah.
but that's
Yeah,
the thing though. But if you keep in mind that when I was working on this, it was 2019. You can
got it.
imagine just how nascent it must have been at that
Of
stage.
course.
So
Of
really,
course.
what we were trying to build was this, end-to-end consumer solution. So say, I'll give you two examples. So you go to this high-end restaurant, you order, a fish, like an exotic fish. And before
Right.
they, make the dish and bring it to you, they actually bring out the fish itself and, just on like a plate or around ice or whatever. And it has like a QR code on it that you can scan, and that code tells you, or it brings you to a portal where it's just like a snapshot, it's like a dashboard. It tells you exactly where
Right.
the fish was fished. It tells you then when it was transported, what the temperature was, how many days it was at that warehouse, and then finally
Got it.
again all of the details around how it got to the restaurant, how long it's been there. And only when you sign off on it can you be like, okay, yeah, you can make this. And the beauty of
And where
doing
is this
this,
restaurant again? This is in US
this was
or
supposed to be a hypothetical restaurant in India, just to uh,
hypothetical? Got it. Okay, got it. Go
yeah,
ahead.
just for us to go over the use case exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, please.
Yeah.
No,
So
go ahead. Go ahead.
basically how it worked was, because it's now all of that information is stored in the blockchain, what that tells you, or what that tells the person that ordered the dish, is that there can be, you have 100% security. There's no way that
Right.
that data could have been fudged, because that would just corrupt the entire blockchain. And so that was our way of building trust. Now you could apply that same thing to say a bar of butter. Say it was manufactured somewhere, it sat around somewhere for a month, and then it got to the store from where you purchased it. Now, what if that company realized later that there was something wrong with that culture, or if it's, there needs to be a callback? Now you can again use that blockchain, because it's immutable, to then send out info to whoever bought it, to be like, hey, please don't consume that. If possible, just toss it. Whatever, you get what I mean. So that was the problem that we were trying to solve at the time. So what we built was, we had a underlying layer of Hyperledger Sawtooth, which was a native blockchain tool developed by Intel, and we used that to basically build our. It was essentially a software as a service, but it was built
Got it.
with the engine as Hyperledger Sawtooth, which is a native blockchain client. So it lets you have a
Right.
principal. It lets you have your layers that you need. Right. It exposes API that you can use to enter the blockchain, look at stuff. Obviously, there's no writing because it's a blockchain. All of the writing is
Right.
just one time when it enters, and that's it. After that, you can't touch it. So we were
Got
using
it.
that to build out some solutions that we were then trying to pitch to clients. That wasn't as easy, or we didn't have much success with the actual selling itself, because of just really how nascent it was, and people just had a tough time understanding why aren't we using a database for this. Which is a valid
Got
question.
it.
You could use a database 100%, but
Right.
again, you could have a developer that goes and changes all the values to whatever he wants, and there's no trust anymore. So that in a nutshell is
Got it.
my experience around blockchain.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, as we get closer to the closing, I mean, I have one question. Like, what's your quick thoughts on Bitcoin?
So I will say I'm not as aware as I would like to be on the subject. I think my understanding of Bitcoin is still fairly rudimentary, but from what I've heard, I know I should have gotten into that about 10 years ago. I know I missed that bus, and from what I understand, there's obviously you need to mine it. There's only a finite amount of it in the world, which gives it value. But and I
Right.
in my college days did that whole plugging in five computers together to mine Bitcoin and ended up getting 0.00001 and was very happy about that. But
Of
again,
course.
as
Yeah.
far as the technical details goes, I'm not the most. I have some investment in Bitcoin, but really that's about it.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Now, anyone needing any information on the topic, we just did an episode with 11-year-old, decade plus old Bitcoiner
Oh, cool.
with Adam O'Brien. Yeah, so
I'll
it was a
check that out.
fascinating conversation. It's a fascinating conversation. Yeah, please check it out. And anyone listening, please check it out. It's our episode 6, so it's really good. I love that episode and had a wonderful time learning more about Bitcoin. So yeah, that's great.
Will
I'm just
do.
going to give a quick break if you wanted to take a quick break, and we'll probably wrap up with some quick questions, and then probably get your closing comments, and then we'll probably next
Yeah.
10 15 minutes, I think.
I think I'm good to wrap. Yeah.
You're
Whenever.
good?
Yeah.
Okay, got
Yeah.
it, got it. Okay, so these are quick rapid fire type questions.
All
So
right.
let me
Hit
know
me.
what you think. So blockchain, is it overhyped or the future?
The future.
Okay, amazing. Indian street food or American fast food? What's your
Oh.
go-to?
That's a good one. I'm gonna say Indian street food just because of the variety. I like things that aren't just sandwiches or burgers. So for that reason, I would pick Indian street food.
Got it, got it. If you would, while you were probably younger or watching TV more often, and like if you could bring back one TV show from your childhood,
Hmm.
what would it be?
So when you say bring back, do you mean in terms of it would have sequels?
Uh, Probably. I mean, if there is something that you could recollect, like a show from your childhood, I think that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I have a few actually. There used to be this one show. You may have heard of it. It's called Shakalaka Boom Boom. Do you know about it?
I might have heard about the name. Sounds very familiar, though.
So it's really dumb. The premise is this kid gets this like magic pencil, and whatever he draws with it comes to life. I really
Right.
enjoyed it, and I think it needs a reboot like yesterday. It needs to be done.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so here is a very hypothetical challenge. I mean, if you were to survive a month without your smartphone, how would that look like?
I think it would be awesome. I would just need my Kindle
You
and
think
I
so?
would be all set. If I have my Kindle and if I have a source of food and water to drink, I think I would actually be more happy than I can understand at this moment. That I need that actually. Where can I
Got
sign
it.
up for that?
Yeah, the SaaS, a new platform we're launching tomorrow. So I'll send
Love
you the
it.
link.
Love it.
And since you mentioned Kindle, like what are some like, top 2 or 3 books that you would recommend anyone reading?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. So like I'm a big fan of making
Or your
recommendations.
favorite book of all time, whatever.
Mm, that's an even more difficult question. I can give you like maybe a top three. One of them is it's called Genome. It's like an entire analysis. Each chapter is a book on all 23 genomes of the human DNA. So I highly recommend that. It's it's basically like a snapshot of entire human history, but also along with our psychology and why we do the things we do, all wrapped into one. Second would be Atomic Habits, James Clear. Probably not the most glamorous option, but it genuinely changed my life. So always will be really grateful to that one. And I think the third, I want to say something fiction, even though I haven't read fiction in many years. But I did really enjoy To Kill a Mockingbird. That would be my third.
Got it. Got it. Great choices. What is that? Okay, fine. This is like this is fun. I mean, what is the social media platform that you probably like secretly spend your most time on? I mean, like no secret about it, but it's saying what may be the
Yeah, it's
social media
definitely
that you end up
Twitter.
spending more time,
Yeah.
professionally or unprofessionally?
Definitely Twitter. Definitely.
Twitter. Okay, got it. So this is something. If you were to like posting memes or never using GIFs again, which one would you pick? I mean, I think the question is, if you had to choose between never using memes or never
Uh-huh.
using GIFs again, which one would you pick?
Probably memes. Probably memes. I feel like memes
Got
have they mean very different they mean a very different thing to what they used to even 3 4 years ago, and I think they're on their way down, so for that reason I'll say gifs.
got it. So this is something about travel. So what's your ultimate like travel destination, like the dream travel destination that you want to go to?
Norway.
Amazing. And like when you're planning for a trip, are you more of like a spontaneous planner or like a detailed travel planner?
I'm right in the middle. Like, it's very hard to explain how or why that works, but I have found a very niche spot exactly in the middle where I know the time block that I need to do something it, but I won't figure out what I'm needing to do. So
Got
that I
it.
can toe the line between both being efficient with my time, but also being
Got it.
spontaneous with my activities.
Got it. Got it. I mean, these are just fun questions to get to know you a little bit more,
Yeah,
Naman.
I'm
I mean, like
enjoying
this
them.
is
Yeah.
like so. This is one more. I mean, like, what's your like the guilty pleasure snack that you cannot live without?
Oh, yeah. Definitely any type of chocolate cookie dunked in milk. It's my weakness. I
Mm.
will cave 10 times out of 10 when presented. Doesn't matter what time of the day it is, if I've had a meal or not, I will cave. It's a problem.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, like a favorite food that you would recommend anyone trying?
Yeah, try my chicken biryani or even the chicken curry that I make, I think is really good. So, if you ever come across me, have me make it for you, and I think you will be really happy with that.
Definitely, if I'm in, you're in Chicago, right? I mean, like,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
I'm in Chicago, I'll definitely reach out to you and we'll enjoy your
please do.
curry and biryani. Definitely. Yeah, yeah, I don't know when, but I visited, I think, a year and a half ago, Chicago.
Oh,
I was there in downtown Chicago for a meet. Yeah, sure, maybe next time. Yes, and so there's a few more. And I think COVID was a time that it locked people inside the homes and things like that, and people picked so many great hobbies. Was there any new hobby or some new skill that you developed during pandemic and you were really surprised that you got really good at?
I wouldn't say I got really good at, but I did learn how to play tennis. I taught myself, and the way I did that was I was in Louisville. I didn't know a single person there, so I just used to go on these Facebook groups for tennis and find strangers to play with. And because it's a no contact sport, people were comfortable playing that. So there was some hits and misses because some players were really good, and I just felt really bad trying
Right.
to play with them because they were like, "What is going on here?" But by the end of 2 3 months, I got fairly like decent enough to pretty much play with the average person, and that's a skill that I really value, and I've been trying to get back into it actually. So tennis was what it was for me.
Got it. And this is probably my last uh, super like the rapid fire question. And if you were to like uh, spend a day with any celebrity, who would that be and why?
It would be, I don't know if he's a celebrity, but it would be Nawal Ravikant. He's an investor more so
I
than
like him.
celebrity.
I like Naval. Yeah, yeah. I'm reading his book. Not his book, but the uh, a book on him. I'm reading that
Of
book.
the
Yeah,
almanac of Nawal
the
Ravikant.
Almanac of
Yeah, yeah,
Ravikant. Yeah, that's it's a
yeah.
great book. Yeah.
I would pick him. I think he's the most important philosopher of our times, and I really admire philosophers.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much it, Naman. Of course, we can probably do another episode to get into another hour, a couple of hours of conversation. I can keep talking to you for hours. I totally enjoyed your answers and your
Likewise,
conversation, man. I loved
likewise.
it. And please, for anyone listening, where can people find you? Best place to find Naman Pandey.
That would either be my Instagram or LinkedIn. Ideally, it would be my YouTube channel, but really, I'm not hard to find. If you just look me up, I'm sure you'll run into me one way or another. I'm active everywhere. You will get a response within 24 hours.
What is the first place they should look you on LinkedIn or like
Probably
Instagram
LinkedIn.
or like
Probably
LinkedIn?
LinkedIn.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it. Did you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Absolutely, definitely do. First of all, thank you so much for giving me this platform and for having me on. As I was sharing with you earlier, I think something that you said really made such a huge difference to my experience here was that, maybe people don't know this because at least for my podcast, a lot of times guests and we have at least a semblance of an agenda. Like I tell them that, maybe for the first half an hour we'll be talking about X and Y, and then for the last 30 we'll be doing Y and Z. So I like to have some structure. So going into this, because there was no structure, I will admit I was a bit nervous about, I didn't want to be put on the spot all of a sudden. But you really have
Right,
that quality of, not, as you said, not trying to extract information, but really just have a conversation that's not, hey, how's the weather today? And hey, what did you have for dinner last night? It's like we talked about, I don't know, such a wide gamut of things. And yet none of them felt like, it was intrusive or I was being made to say things that I didn't want to and such. So I think that quality that you have of making somebody feel comfortable is really underrated. And I feel really grateful to have been exposed to that. So again, thank you so much for having me, and it's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm happy to have you on my pod soon, where we can delve into some of your more professional experiences with all of the companies that you've started and such. So yeah, really looking forward to our continued friendship here, Vijay.
for sure, man. It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for your kind words. Really looking forward to it. Yeah, yeah. Happy to chat with you anytime. I'm here. Just knock my door. I'll be there to respond at least within a day. I try to respond, ask, yeah, every request. So all is good. So I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for your time again. I appreciate it and wish you all the best in every conversation that you encounter and move forward with, and every endeavor that you move forward in your life with. And then you have a lot of goals and aspirations, I'm sure. I wish and pray that everything comes true, and wish you all the best, Naman, and wish you all success. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Go well.
Bye, bye, bye. Yeah. The